I will be keeping time. I will switch my camera off again once we start. I will appear again to indicate the time, so please don't be alarmed if my face pops up unexpectedly.
Okay.
All right. So everybody, welcome back for our second talk of today. We have today Maria Therese Tionson and Grace Saqueton from the Department of English and Comparative Literature of the University of the Philippines in Diliman. Maria Therese Tionson is an assistant professor at the Department of English and Comparative Literature, University of the Philippines, Diliman, where she handles English teaching, language studies, and academic writing courses. Her research interests include critical pedagogy, interdisciplinary collaboration, and writing in the disciplines. Grace M. Saqueton is an assistant professor who is a member of the English language program of the Department of English and Comparative Literature, University of the Philippines, Diliman. Her research interests include critical discourse analysis, language and gender studies, world Englishes, unequal Englishes, and sociolinguistics. Thank you very much for coming here. Over to you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, John. Okay, so Marella and I are going to present our project called entitled Assessing Filipino K-12 Graduates' Writing Needs, Developing a Responsive Diagnostic Writing Test. Right. So this research project started when we were tasked to develop an assessment tool that aimed to assess the level of writing proficiency of incoming freshmen who are graduates of K-12. So in 2018, the first batch of K-12 graduates were accepted as freshmen in our university, and our department wanted to find out if the revisions we made in our academic writing course matched the level of proficiency of these students. The immediate plan was to give the students a diagnostic essay, but the problem was we didn't have a standardized assessment tool that we can use in assessing the diagnostic essays. Creating a rubric was the first suggestion, since rubrics are useful tools for instruction and evaluation, specifically in assessing the effectiveness of courses and identifying areas for improvement. They are also an important tool in assessing the writing proficiency of L2 learners. The problem, however, was colleagues were not that open to the idea of a standardized test. Academic freedom is something that we value in our university, and the idea of a rubric that is similar to a standardized test like IELTS or TOEFL is seen as something that would encroach on that academic freedom. This notion stems from the lack of research on using locally developed writing scales for diagnostic assessments, and the lack of studies on using rubrics as a diagnostic tool to gauge college students' writing proficiency in the Philippines. In my department, a rubric is seen as a tool that would somehow dictate a cookie-cutter assessment and grading system. But since there was really a need to assess new K-12 graduates' writing abilities to see if they can cope with the new English 13 course, the General Education Committee still conducted writing assessment tasks to 1,750 English 13 students in the semester of academic year 2018-2019. Marella will discuss the diagnostic essay prompt and the changes that we made in the prompt in her analysis. The data from the diagnostic assessment will be used to improve instruction, modify curricula, and decide if remedial support like bridging programs are necessary. Part of the initial phase of the project was creating a rubric, and for our purpose, we opted for an analytic rubric since it is based on multiple criteria for assessing outcomes, which is appropriate for our purpose. Given the multilingual landscape of the Philippines, the uneven distribution of access to learning resources, and the different social-linguistic background of the learners, an analytic rubric is adapted. After the rubric was developed, it was used in grading the diagnostic essays. We asked the help of colleagues to act as validators. A statistician was also asked to help us determine a significant concordance during the calibration process. It was during the calibration process that we found out some problems in the process of developing the assessment. Okay? Problems like we didn't really put much thought into the creation of the prompt, or we didn't really consider the linguistic backgrounds of the students when we created the rubric, and we were not able to adapt this descriptors to the context of our students. Marella will expound on this later on in the analysis. The team then agreed to have a second phase. So in this presentation, we will evaluate the processes that we did in the first phase of the project in order to reflect on what worked and what can be improved on in the next phase. Using WEIR socio-cognitive framework of validity, we will examine the theoretical context and scoring validity of our assessments. WEIR's framework is multifaceted and is seen as appropriate in our context, okay? Given that we are also looking at the different macro skills and the different facets in our assessment tool. Next, please. Okay. We will be using these different types of validity: theoretical, theoretical validity, context validity, scoring validity. But for this study, we cannot look at the consequential validity yet, since we have not piloted the, we'll have piloted the rubric, but we have not graded the essays using the rubric that we used.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So I'm just going to switch. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and then allow Grace to share.
All right.
Yeah. So
I will share.
Okay. So while Grace is fixing up the presentation, so Grace laid down the context for our project, and we talked about how important it is for us to be able to determine how valid the rubric is, since it is the basis, for us to be able to determine what skills our students have, how proficient they are. And for us, we didn't have a lot of experience coming into this, so we really wanted to reflect on what we can do better. So the framework that you see over here is essentially from WEIR, and it summarizes how the different aspects of validity, such as context, theoretical, and scoring validity, interact with one another. So I'll be examining our assessment tool from those aspects. Okay, so for context validity, this pertains to the task itself and how appropriate the prompt is, and what we're asking the students to do. So the students were asked to write a short essay that argues for a position in response to a prompt. So the discourse mode is an argumentation and information type of essay, and it was open-ended. So we thought that we had chosen a prompt that was familiar to students. So, but later on in our reflection, we will explain how we should have chosen something more common. So students were given 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the teacher. So again, as you will see later on, we can still improve on the administrative aspect of this test because this is new to us. So we just asked teachers, can you give this to your students? So it was really up to them, how much time they would give. And so as long as they gave us the tests back. So we were thinking that we still have to come up with more, I think, coherent and consistent guidelines. So there was no waiting for the grade, since it's a diagnostic test, and then the addressee is the professor, since they are the ones reading the paper. Okay, next, please. All right, so this is the prompt. The prompt was based on the IELTS Academic Writing Task 2, where you have to write essentially an argumentative essay. So we chose the IELTS because it's more representative of different varieties of English, and we thought that the prompt was what you call this, the rubric was something that we could work with. So we chose this prompt because it requires using argumentation, and then it asks students to apply different rhetorical modes and show that they have knowledge of the necessary elements of a good argument. Okay, next. So this is the prompt that we ask students to answer. Special programs for social integration and help are said to be better alternatives than harsher prison sentences for minor crimes. Describe what you think is a minor crime and then provide at least 2 special programs for help and integration that you think can address it. Give examples to support your answer. So we thought initially that this prompt was already good, but then as you can see, during our discussions, we thought we would have to revise it in order for it to be clearer. So what we did was we broke it down into more paragraphs. We gave more explicit instructions. We set the context, and then we also gave more instructions in the sense like what will they be evaluated on and how much time they have. Although again, moving forward, we're thinking that maybe we can have a better prompt, since maybe we saw that not all students were familiar with a minor crime, or maybe we had read later on that we should try to look for prompts that are more neutral, maybe that would ask, at that time we chose a prompt like this because of the political background in the Philippines, and our students are known to be politically engaged, but next time we're thinking of something better. Okay, so next, let's go to theoretical validity. So we used Grabe and Kaplan's socio-cognitive model of writing because it takes into account both the internal processing and contextual factors in writing. So here we establish theoretical validity by looking for a task that asks students to use their linguistic resources and their content knowledge, and also executive processes that are used in writing an essay, such as goal setting, topic and genre modifying, organizing, translating, and reviewing. So we were able to do this in the prompt more easily for the executive processes because they're already familiar with how to write essays. But like I mentioned earlier, we had reflected on the fact that maybe if we had chosen a better prompt, would it have had different results? Would the prompt have actually affected how well our students could write? So this is one of the things that we were reflecting on. Okay, next please. Okay, so the next thing that we looked at is scoring validity, and in particular, the rubric. So the scale that is used in assessing performance tasks, such as writing tests, they embody the developer's notion of what skills are being measured by the test. So for this reason, the scale is critical importance. Developing it is of critical importance for the validity of the assessment. So much of phase 1, like Grace said, focused on validating this rubric. Okay, next please. So here, I'm going to discuss what we did in order to validate the rubric. So first, we collected all the essays. We had 1,750 essays, but we had to choose which essays to test the rubric on. So we disqualified essays that were written by non-freshman students, because sometimes in our context, older students are able to take English 13, even though it is usually a freshman English class. And then we also took out essays not in narrative form and essays with drawings. And then all essays that were included were then grouped into set A, which had 3 paragraphs, set B, which were of 4 to 6 paragraphs, and set C, that had more than 6 paragraphs. So in anticipation of several iterations, several samples of 10 essays per set were randomly chosen from the population of essays. Okay, next please. Okay, so we asked ourselves these questions when we were creating the rubric from WEIR. So what type of rating scale is desired? Who's going to use the rating scale? What aspects of writing are most important? What do the descriptors look like? And how will scores be reported? Next. So we chose an analytic rubric, and then we decided to make it assessor-oriented since it is our colleagues who will be using it. We also looked for aspects of academic writing that are important in the university writing context. And as mentioned, the descriptors that we use were modified from IELTS writing. There's a public rubric. So we looked at that, and then we adjusted it from 9 bands to 7 bands, and then we adjusted the wording. And then we haven't decided yet how to report scores since we have not reached that phase yet. Okay, next please. Okay, so this is an example of the rubric. So for example, as you can see, there are 3 columns. There's one for content, organization, and language and mechanics. And highest that the student can get is 7, and then the lowest that they can get is 1. So for example, for 7, presents a fully developed position that completely addresses the key ideas in the prompt. And for 6, presents a sufficiently developed position. So what we did was we changed the descriptors in order to allow our colleagues to be able to discriminate between different levels of ability. So can we go to the next one? Okay, so here, just to show you what 4 to 1 looks like. So does not express a clear position, does not address the question. So this rubric was the result of refinement. So after we had tested an initial rubric, we found that there were inconsistencies or unclear meanings in words, and then we fine-tuned the rubric until we arrived at this. Okay, next please. Okay, so the raters, there were 7 of us. Grace and I were part of the team, and we had 5 other colleagues from our department who vary in curricular expertise and also in experience. Okay, next. All right, so just to sum up, I think, yeah, we're also kind of running out. I think we have 5 minutes left, so I'll just go through this quickly. So here, in the experiment design, what we did was to design an iteration for sets A, B, and C to complete one cycle. So statistically significant agreement had to be reached in set A for the cycle to proceed to set B. And a similar requirement was set to proceed to set C. So each rater was given 10 essays in each iteration, and the sets of essays were the same from rater to rater. Raters were not allowed to communicate while grading the essays. Okay, next please. Okay, so during the first iteration, the raters were given the initial rubric prepared by the team, and then the raters were given 5 minutes to read and internalize the rubric. And then the first set of essays labeled A1 to A10 was distributed, and then each rater was given 75 to 90 minutes to grade 10 essays. The graded essays were then collected and decoded for statistical analysis. Okay, next please. Next. Okay. So it must be noted that progression from set A to set B and then until set C was realized because significant agreement was reached in each of the elements in the rubric. And a new set of essays was given within a set and graded when an element where concordance was not met. Okay, next please. Okay, so we used Kendall's coefficient of concordance as the statistical method, and it is used to determine if the scores given by raters were coherent given independent grading. And this statistical measure detects if raters are able to distinguish an order between essays as to which are inferior or superior. And concordance means an agreement on the placing of essays from worst to best, not necessarily on the actual scores given. Okay, next please. So data processing was done using SPSS version 23, and then we tested the null hypothesis that there was no concordance among raters, and the null hypothesis was rejected and significant concordance was concluded because of the p-value. So you will see the results in the next slide. Okay, next please. Okay. So set A, statistically significant concordance was immediately reached in just one set of short essays. So most significant were in organization, language and mechanics, and content, and for the overall mark. So I'm just going to breeze through this in the interest of time. Okay, next please. Okay, so for set B, you can see that statistically significant concordance was immediately achieved and just one set of B essays, but we had to recalibrate it for content, so we had another batch. But these are the values. Okay, next please. Okay, and then for set C, statistically significant concordance was immediately achieved in just one set of longer essays. So most significant were in organization, language and mechanics, and content. Okay, so overall there was significant concordance. Okay, next please. Okay, so at this point, we have had certain questions about how to move forward, and I'm going to bring the floor back to Grace so she can discuss some of the things that we thought about.
All right, so I'll just discuss this very briefly. Given that this is the first kind of assessment tool project that we made in our department, it's the first of its kind. We think that the project is very successful. However, upon further reflection, we think that there are a lot of other aspects that we could look into in the next phase. So these are some of the things that we plan to do. We need to revise the rubric further by clarifying phrasing of descriptors. We have to have more raters. We need to revise the prompt. We need to pilot the prompt to a bigger group of students to improve test administration and implementation procedures. But more importantly, we acknowledge that language tests have a long history of being instruments of social and social and cultural exclusion. And we also acknowledge that rubrics are not just instructional materials, instructional tools, but they are also ideological apparatuses that put forth a dominant ideology and silence less dominant ones. So given those considerations, here are the further questions that we will consider in the next phase of the project. So we will look into framing the assessment tool in such a way that it's more inclusive of the different backgrounds and context of the students. We will look into we will consider the different varieties of Englishes that our students speak, okay? And we will also try to find a way to accommodate the different aspects of Philippine English into the descriptors of our rubric. So that's all for now. These are plans that we will implement in the future, and we would appreciate questions and comments from you so we could further improve our assessment tool. Thank you very much. I'll stop share. You're on mute, Jen.
My God, that's the third time now. Thank you. So yes, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. So I don't see any questions as of yet. We do have a little bit of time, so please take your time to type a question in the chat box if you have any.
I think somebody's raising his hand, Jan.
Hi, Jan. Can I ask a question? This is Mike
Yes.
from British Council in the Philippines.
Go
Yeah,
for it.
thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask, I came in late, sorry, I came from the other room. What is the main objective of the study, and was it done in UP Diliman mainly, and is this study aligned with the trust of the university?
All right. Yeah, as we mentioned in the start of your presentation, the main goal was to assess whether the changes that we made in the course English 13, which is academic writing, is aligned with the level of the proficiency of K to 12 graduates. Since in 2018, it was the first time that we have graduates of K to 12. I mean, freshmen that are graduates of K to 12. So that's
Right.
that's the main goal, so that we could either adjust the curriculum or offer bridge to remedial programs to these students. Okay, for the second question, yes, it is in the context of UP Diliman, and it is aligned with, of course, the thrusts of the university and the department as well. That's why in the presentation, I think there is this push and pull between coming up or creating a standardized rubric and negotiating with the academic freedom of the professors as well.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I do a follow-up? Sorry.
Yes,
For
please.
sure.
How do you see this impacting the curriculum of English or maybe the GE subjects in the university system, or maybe in just the campus? Do you
Just
see
in
additional
Diliman,
English subjects? Yeah. Do you see having additional English subjects maybe as in addition to English 13?
Okay, I don't know if my internet is okay, if you can hear me, but
Yeah, we
I
can.
think the idea is not so much an additional, but rather because in the before K to 12, we had English 1, which is like the kind of basic college English that students had to take. And then some students were saying that it was too basic for them, or they were bored by it.
Yes.
So what
Mhm.
happened was in recent meetings, English 1 was demoted from a GE. So
Right.
it's now like a bridging program.
Mhm.
So what we're trying to say is, as of yet, we don't know yet,
Okay.
whether we will need to bring English 1 back, or we will need to have more other GE English subjects, but that's also not
Yes,
in our control because right
of
now
course.
K to 12 there's this trend towards decreasing the number of humanities subjects that students can get. So even if we want students to have more English classes, the university, some colleges think, oh, just one subject of English is enough, or just one
Right.
oral communication subject is enough. So maybe if we have this data, and we can kind of show them that actually, based on this, the students need more. So we can't rely on what they just studied in high school. So that's not enough. So basically, this sort of project kind of underscores the need, to make evidence-based decisions before we can move forward. And unfortunately, we're kind of stalled at the moment because of the pandemic, but hopefully moving forward, we can come up with a better face and then have better recommendations in the future.
Right, thank you. One last thing.
Sure.
Are there enough platforms for researches like this in English, in
Um,
assessment, in the Philippines, in the Philippine
in the
context?
Philippines, I don't think I can speak really for the Philippines because in the University of the Philippines alone, like Grace mentioned, this study is like not common, so it's actually it's a study that comes from the ground up. Like it was our department shares idea, we have to assess the students. So she formed a team, she applied for a grant, so we got money. So it's not really a policy that came from above. So but because UP is a leading university in the Philippines, and usually what UP does gets maybe what do you call this, followed sometimes by
Attention,
other
yes.
universities. So maybe we're hoping that if we do this right, then we can kind of set a good model. But again, it's just really in the trial phase. So thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
thank
Mike,
you.
for your questions.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anyone else with any questions? If not, then thank you very much, Maria and Grace. That was enlightening. We are back for the next presentation at 2:20. So we'll hope to see you then.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Okay, thank you everyone for coming.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Caroline.